All right, what's up, YouTube? Back at you with another video. I can't even say that this is going to be a quick take because this is going to be a long video. And before I even really get into it, I have to preface everything I'm going to go on to say and present in my video with a few things. The first is the inspiration behind this video. And for as long as I've been on YouTube, my whole intention was to use my platform, for lack of a better word, for a few different things. But if you were to go to my channel and go to the oldest videos, amongst the gaming videos that you will find, you will also see that I've been talking about race and politics in instance of police brutality and fatalities against Black people in America. So I've always talked about this. All right. And it's reached a point where I truly became numb to it all, to the point where I stopped following these things because I personally felt like it's but so much talking that I can do, especially when I feel that my voice is not reaching enough people for my message to have a real effect on the world. Even though I believe that if it's just 10 people that hear you, that's enough because those 10 people can then repeat your message and that's how it truly spreads. Now, back in 2020, August of 2020, almost 6 years ago, I had a podcast episode, which you can look up, it's still there, and it was called State of the Country. And that particular episode was important to me because what I did was I got Black men of the older generation, men who were born in the late 50s and 60s, to come on and talk about what's been happening in the country. And I posed different questions and I tried to, again, juxtapose my mentality as a youth with the mentalities and mindsets of, again, those, a few generations removed from me. And one moment in that podcast episode stood out to me, and I never forgot that. And it was a exchange that I had with Kevin, who, shout outs to Kevin. Um, and he was saying that, oh, things are changing every day. To say that things are not going to change is ridiculous because things are changing every day. And I asked him in that moment, I said, what's changed this year? I said, what's changed this year? Crickets. He couldn't say anything. Okay. What he was trying to hit me with was an empty platitude that people give Black people every day, talking about, oh, well, change will come. Change is going to happen. We have to keep no. And I'm actually going to put the clip right here.
But I think we have no power and things really are going to continue on a grand scale. Things are going to continue to be the way that they are because
power is ownership. That's the only way
exactly. And until you have the resources to do something, right, whether it's you have influence, you have a platform, you have money, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's hard to facilitate change because I can think however I want and have these thoughts and opinions, but what do they mean if I don't have anything, if I don't have the means? And really in this day and age, it's really if you have money, you don't.
Well, you know what?
Where you can buy property, like you said, open up things, for kids to influence change in your own community. But things are just going to be the way that they are. You know, like I said, we can vote.
I refuse to say things are going to be the way they are because things are changing every freaking day.
What's changed this year?
What?
What's changed this year?
What changes me?
Got to change yourself if you want to change the world.
The reason why I bring that up is because it's 6 years later and we're having the same conversation, the same exact conversation. And I can say in 6 years, from a social standpoint and a political standpoint, nothing has changed for Black people. Exclusively, nothing has changed for us in 6 years. Why? Because the same things have been happening over the course of 6 years. And we've got no substantial change whatsoever at all. And what I've come to understand from following these situations that occur and talking about the situations that occur and thinking about them, analyzing them, I understand that the worst thing a Black family can do, the worst thing that a Black person can do or say in response to these things that happen to us, these tragedies, these murders, the worst thing that a Black person can say is, I want justice. Again, the worst thing a Black person can say is, I want justice for said Black boy, Black girl, Black man, Black woman. You know why? Because my overall takeaway from all of these things that have happened, not even just in the last 6 years, but let's talk about the last few hundred years, and I'm going to prove it, is that Black people cannot get real justice in America. Black people cannot get justice in America. As it is currently right now, Black people will never get justice in America if that's what we are asking for. You can't ask for justice in America. It's not going to happen. Blacks, Africans cannot get and will never get justice in America, and I'm going to prove it. Because this is too broad a request. And if you understand the way that this country works, then you will understand that justice is not afforded to Black people. That's not a privilege. And no, you cannot equate justice with a dollar amount, because yes, there have been instances where Black people have been paid restitution. Yeah. But this is not an outcome that'll prevent the same things from happening in the future. So justice and money are not synonymous, right? If let's say, God forbid, something were to happen to me, right? They pay me $10 million. That doesn't prevent the same thing from happening to the next Black boy that looks like me. So what does justice look like? What is that? And I'll get into that a little bit later, but I had to preface everything that I'm going to say with all of that, because I know there are going to be some Black people out there that are going to disagree with me, but you have to understand where you are, where you at, and the rules of engagement, and why the rules of engagement do not apply to you. Because the other day I actually drew up all my notes to present my argument as to why Black people will not get justice in America, because I had to prove it. It's like, you see, I'm not the type of person where I just get on the internet and say things. No, I present facts, undisputed facts from the horse's mouth, from the white horse's mouth. Because to me, at this point right now, it's like shit is getting grim. I mean, let me not even say shit is getting grim, because it really doesn't get, any more grim and morbid than the genocide, committed against Black people, people that look just like me hundreds of years ago. The shit that was happening to us 60 years ago, 65 years ago, all recent history. But anyway, let me get into it. Now, my whole posit is that Black people will never get justice in America. Now, upon doing my research, okay, my initial reaction was the reason why things are happening to us is because Black people are second class, third class citizens in America. And then when we talk about that, the easiest way we can equate that into something tangible is the 3/5 compromise, or the 3/5 clause. Okay. Now, I want to read a quote from an article courtesy of the usconstitution.org by Stephen Philbrick, who I'm assuming is a European, a Caucasian man. Right? And the quote says, Constitution Day is today. So I'm assuming when he wrote this article, it was Constitution Day. And he says, the United States Constitution is a document that evolves with the times. Constitutional inadequacies and societal injustices are challenged and social progress is the result. Instead of reverence for this brilliant document that ensures our rights, it is attacked by some as a severely flawed and even a racist contract. One of the most widely used means to defame the Constitution is to manipulate perception of the Three-Fifths Compromise. Agenda-driven academicians and committed ideologues routinely state the United States Constitution only recognizes blacks as three-fifths of a person. No context is given. This often repeated falsehood foments disrespect of the Constitution and contempt for the founders who authored it. David Gans is the director of the Human Rights, Civil Rights, and Citizenship Program at the Constitutional Accountability Center, a think tank and law firm. The Express News published a column by him on constitutional requirements in the past year. Count All People as Constitution Requires, March 10th, in which he stated that someone who was enslaved would be counted as three-fifths of a person for the purpose of determining representation in Congress. The magnitude of this constitutional illiteracy is not restricted to those on the political left. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice routinely stated in her speeches, in the original United States Constitution, I was only three-fifths of a person. In 1787, the founders were attempting to form a union and preserve the nascent United States. This imperfect compromise allowed for preservation of the republic while also confronting the moral and systemic evils of slavery. Erroneous and distorted interpretations of the Constitution only intensify the societal divide in America. All right. Now, I want to briefly respond to that because I'm going to body that whole entire, quote in a minute. But what I want to highlight is two things. It says, in which he stated that someone who was enslaved would be counted as three-fifths of a person for the purpose of determining representation in Congress. So what he's trying to say is that the three-fifths clause was only for the sake of representation from a voting standpoint, which is something that I'm going to emphasize later on. But my thing is this. If the enslaved, if blacks, Africans, if they were actually considered whole people in the eyes of the Constitution, then why would you consider them to be only three-fifths of a person for the purpose of determining representation in Congress? If you view them as the same as a white person, then why not just view them as a whole person? Black people were the only ones that were considered to be three-fifths of a person for the purposes of determining representation in Congress. They were the only ones. Everybody else was considered a whole person. Right? It was three black people were considered one white person, technically by their logic. So already that's flawed to begin with. Because if I'm creating some sort of policy, and in the eyes of my policy or my company or organization, everybody is equal, then why would I single out one fucking person and say they're three-fifths of a person and everybody else is whole? So that's one. Two, he said erroneous and distorted interpretations of the Constitution only intensify the societal divide in America. First of all, who created the societal divide in America? Who? It wasn't black people. Black people are only observing the societal divide in America. We're calling out the societal racial divide in America. We didn't create that shit. So how can I intensify some shit that I didn't fucking create? I didn't set the rules of engagement. Y'all did that. Y'all did that shit. So it's like, don't try to say, oh, well, black people use the three-fifths clause and distort and misinterpret the shit, when in fact, when you really look at it, it literally highlights the fucking problem right then and there. It's like, I don't even have to go no further than the quote to fucking prove my point. I really don't. Because in the Three-Fifths Compromise, the whole intention literally shows how the country viewed black people. the enslaved. They didn't view them as human beings for the purposes of representation. They said, okay, 3 enslaved black people equates to 1 white person. And I'm going to prove why America still views black people the same exact way today. I'm going to prove that shit. And that's going to tie into all of the instances of injustices, murders, killings, social inequities, racial inequities that have been happening for decades and hundreds of years. Okay, so Stephen Philbrick is detached from reality. He sees things through a white constitutional lens. The Constitution did not have black people in mind and did not favor black people when it was written. Okay, because that shit was created in the 1700s, if I'm not fucking mistaken. But anyway, let me just verify that just to make sure that my shit is fucking correct. But let's pause that real quick. When was the Constitution written? Yep, nigga, I was right. It says the United States Constitution, written in 1787, ratified in 1788, and in operation since 1789. But back then, black people were still enslaved. So how can something written in those times, okay, have black people's best interest? When black people were being raped, murdered, they weren't allowed to read, write, they really weren't even fucking allowed, you know what I'm saying, to vote. Okay? They had no rights, no civil rights. Their human rights were ignored. So how is some shit that has been in operation since 1789 gonna have me in mind? That's impossible. That is fucking impossible. Anyway, now let me continue. So I said, what is the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment was written and proposed on June 13th, 1866, and adopted and ratified on July 9th, 1868. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And I highlighted this part. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. All right, now I'm just going to throw a name out there. Eric Garner. Perfect example of a violation of his 14th Amendment. Perfect example because dude died on the spot selling cigarettes. Got choked to death on the street. Perfect example. Sandra Bland. Need I say more? Now, Section 2 says representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state, being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. Now, all I really got to respond to that really is one word, and it's gerrymandering, which is a whole subtopic that I would really talk about in a whole separate video. But just to, let's say, respond to that and debunk that, why is gerrymandering in the South such a big fucking issue, if that's the case? Now it says, Section 5, which is a real big issue. It says the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Now, before I even go on, right? The 14th Amendment does not apply to black people. Because I don't even have to create a list of names to prove my point. Because if you're black and you're listening to this, you already know a bunch of people that come to mind as a result of what I just read. Because anybody with some real common sense and knows the shit that have happened to black people and things that happen to black people every day. And I say this all the time. Things happen to black people every single day. It's just that not every story hits national news. Not every story is going to hit CNN, Fox News, ABC. Not every story is going to make it to the motherfucking shade room. You see what I'm saying? Things happen all the time. It's like what happened to Ashley Janae. That shit didn't make it to fucking CNN. I'm just using that as an example. Not to say that that was a breach of the 14th Amendment, but you get my point. Right? And also, there is a video essay that I created called Questions for Malcolm X. You don't have to watch the whole entire thing. If you have the attention span for it, please do. But the most profound part, or one of the most profound parts in that video, which is essentially a conversation between myself and Malcolm X, right? And the point that I was trying to emphasize with that is that you would think Malcolm X is still alive today because of the stuff that he was talking about in the 60s. You would think he was still here because everything he was talking about back then is happening right now, just in a different form. It just doesn't look exactly the same, but everything rhymes. It's similar. It's synonymous. But the beginning is a response to Tim Scott and Kamala Harris, two black people, two black politicians, one left, one right, one liberal, one fucking conservative. Both of them said that America is not a racist country. And I literally showed back to back one white person in a situation with law enforcement and a black person, and the two complete differences in the way that law enforcement deals with both parties. White people are protected by the Constitution, and this is why when you see a white person getting into an altercation with the police are not quick to beat their ass. The police are not quick to pull a gun on them. Why? Because they know that they have to respect that white person's rights. Because the Constitution was made by white people, for white people, of white people. You know what I'm saying? It's for them. So they have to respect that. You know what I'm saying? It's like a white person will go into a school, commit a mass shooting, and then walk out alive. Police are protecting them. I think even one of them took one of the fucking guys to like a restaurant or some shit before they took them to jail. I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember hearing that. You know, they took him to get something to eat, and then they brought him downtown to book him and shit. And then a lot of these people, they get life sentences, and if that. You know what I'm saying? But most black people get killed on the spot for doing not even a fraction of how heinous an act a mass shooting is at a fucking elementary school. But anyway, also I do want to say that the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Black people have never gotten any real legislation, none with teeth, and I'm going to prove that. Anyway, let's continue. Now I'm spinning the block on the 3/5 clause in compromise and why, according to people like Stephen Philbrick, that it's not a, how should I say, it doesn't apply. You know what I'm saying? Because what somebody like him will say is that, oh, well, it was used for the purposes of representation and voting and all that, when really that was just, you know, white people further exploiting black people for their own purposes and political agendas and things that they wanted to see happen in the South before really the South was even a part of the motherfucking United States, right? So it says the origin of the 3/5 compromise for people who don't know. And this is going to be pretty lengthy. But it says in 1787, the delegates to the Constitutional Convention found themselves confronted with the question of slavery and how hundreds of thousands of enslaved people in the new republic would affect the Constitution. The humanity and rights of these enslaved Americans were not a priority of the delegates as they debated this issue. So they didn't give a damn about black people. That's not why they were even having that discussion. Rather, their debates centered on if and how the enslaved persons would be counted when allocating seats in the new House of Representatives. On June 11th, 1787, Roger Sherman of Connecticut proposed that only the free inhabitants of each state should count towards apportionment, distribution by state, of the House of Representatives. Edward Rutledge and Pierce Butler of South Carolina then proposed what became the Three-Fifths Compromise, suggesting that House seats be apportioned in proportion to the whole number of white and other free citizens and inhabitants of every age, sex, and condition, including those bound to servitude for a term of years, and 3/5 of all other persons not comprehended in the foregoing description, except Indians not paying taxes in each state. So, bro, basically what they were trying to say was that black people were NPCs. And if you don't know what an NPC is, an NPC is a non-playable character. So when you play a video game, like let's say Grand Theft Auto, you're the main character, right? You play as the main character, and then all the other, beings that walk around the streets, they don't even count. They're just there. They're lifeless, right? It's like, I'm being honest with you. Like when I play Grand Theft Auto, the lives of NPCs don't matter. So if I gotta run a motherfucker over, I'm gonna run him over. If I'm just gonna pop him in his face, I'm going to do that. So that's how black people enslaved were. Even freemen too. Let's talk about it. That's how they were viewed back then. Just beings to be exploited, a commodity. That's how they were viewed. So again, it says, in proportion to the whole number of white and other free citizens and inhabitants of every age, sex, and condition, including those bound to servitude for a term of years for a term of years. So those are the people that they acknowledge. And then it says 3/5 of all other persons and everybody else. You know what I'm saying? And then they were talking about blacks because they even cited Indians. So they acknowledge Indians, and then who are considered Indians, the quote unquote Native Americans. That's who they were talking about. So they even acknowledged them. But they said 3/5 of all other persons not comprehended in the foregoing description. So everybody else. So you can even see in the verbiage how they view black people back then. They didn't call them blacks. They didn't call them Negroids. They didn't call us Africans. They just said 3/5 of all other persons who weren't even mentioned in the shit. But the 3/5 compromise does not reflect the way that black people were actually viewed and treated. Get the fuck out of here, Stephen Philbrick. Get the fuck out of here. Any other white person or politician that thinks that the 3/5 compromise was a harmless, act or clause? Come on, man. It's all there. It's all there, regardless of what the intention behind it is. When you read it, anybody with any sort of racial IQ or consciousness, political IQ, can see it all right then and there. So I see why Condoleezza Rice was saying that in the Constitution, I was considered 3/5 a person, because she was right. Because they were 3/5 of a person. If your human rights are being denied every day, if you're being separated from your families, indoctrinated into an inhumane system where you're forced to pick cotton in 120-degree fucking weather, you're probably eating gruel. Animals have more rights than you do. They're more well regarded in dogs were than they were. Raped, killed, and you're not 3/5 of a person in that type of society and system. What the fuck is Stephen Philbrick even talking about? What? Anyway, let's continue. It says, in other words, every white citizen, including indentured servants, would be counted as whole people, while black citizens will be counted as 3/5 of a person. After the Union's victory in the Civil War, which had nothing to do with black people, by the way, all right, you know what I'm saying? Let's just be real with that. People think that the Civil War was fought to end slavery. It had nothing to do with slavery. That shit had nothing to do with slavery because, see, when I was in social studies back in the day, the Civil War obviously was a battle between the North and the South, right? But motherfuckers in the North had slaves too. So what was the real conflict based off of? It had nothing to do with black people. So the Civil War was not in any means related to black people, even though people called, the plight of black people in the mid 1900s, the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act, and all that had nothing to do with that shit. It had nothing to do with that shit. Anyway, Congress explicitly abolished the Three-Fifths Compromise through the passage of the 14th Amendment. Section 2 of the 14th Amendment required that seats in the House of Representatives must be apportioned among the several states by counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Native Americans, blah, blah, blah. I got into that. Now, there is a quote which is lengthy, and I have to read it because I'm driving my point home. This is for people who have active listening skills, people who actually care about these topics. So you'll understand the system that you are functioning in, maneuvering in this day and age. And you will understand that there are many inequities that have never been addressed. Yes, this country does see color. It's seen color for hundreds of years since we were brought here. These people have seen color for a couple thousand years because this conflict has been going on for a very long time. Anyway, so this is a quote from repository.digital.georgetown.edu. So these are scholarly sources. And it says, this is long, but I'm going to get into it. For over 230 years, historians and scholars have argued that the Three-Fifths Clause of the United States Constitution, which counted slaves as three-fifths a citizen when calculating states' population for apportionment in the House of Representatives, gave Southern states a disproportional amount of power in Congress, which is the whole reason why there was fighting so hard. Because, again, the Confederacy was a separate entity from the northern states. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you even had like back then in those times, you had like Florida, it'd be like Southern Florida separating from Northern Florida because they wanted to do their own shit. You know, that's how it was back then. And it says, this slave power, quote unquote, afforded by the additional slave seats in the House of Representatives and extra votes in the Electoral College allegedly prolonged slavery well beyond the anticipated timelines for gradual emancipation efforts already enacted by several states at the time of the Constitutional Convention. So therefore, it's like, all right, it's like when people talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, okay, that didn't automatically mean like, oh, the slave master was like, all right, nigga, go on now, you're free. It didn't happen like that. That shit still took time. It's like slaves, because you see this depicted in movies, you know, slaves, they heard about the shit in passing, but they didn't even know that that was an actual reality. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, it says an analysis of a sampling of these debates starts in the period immediately following ratification and follows these debates well into the 21st century. Debates on the pro or anti-slavery aspects of the Constitution began began almost immediately after the ratification with the election of 1800 and resurfaced during many critical moments in the antebellum period, which is the antebellum South. You don't know what the antebellum South is, think Django Unchained. You know what I'm saying? Big Sugar Daddy's plantation. That shit. You know, Calvin Candy. That was the antebellum South. Crazy shit. Including the Missouri Compromise. The Dred Scott decision. Be mindful of that. The Dred Scott decision. The Compromise of 1850 and the Wilmot Proviso. These debates were further fueled by the Garrisonian anti-slavery movement in the 1840s and made the decade leading to the election of Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, perhaps the most divisive period in American history. Post-antebellum debates on the Three-Fifths Clause quieted until the turn of the century, when scholarly research tended to take an anachronistic view on the matter, most notably with the progressive era bearding economic origins and the neo-Garrisonian debates of the civil rights era. Now, for people who don't know what an anachronism is, my understanding of an anachronism is basically someone who it relates to timelines, right? In a sequencing of events. So if I have an issue with an anachronism, that means I have an issue with the sequencing of events that something has happened. And just to clarify and get my bearings and shit, basically exactly. So I just Googled it just to get the definition, and I was correct. So an anachronism is anything that is chronologically out of place. Exactly. So that means I have an issue with the sequencing of events and shit like that. So you hear that word, that's what that means. So if someone says to me, oh, you broke my vase yesterday. But I'm like, no, I broke that shit last week. You know what I'm saying? I'm having an issue, an anachronistic issue with what she said. All right. Now it says, finally, in the 21st century, views have begun to take on a more moderate position, espousing a combination of factors, creating what some still call a pro-slavery constitution, which is fucking true. My final assessment concludes that the pro-slavery clauses in the Constitution were incidental to more significant concerns of the convention delegates. The security, unity, and economic stability of the nation was at stake, and these issues took primacy, leading to several compromises, including the Three-Fifths Clause to ensure ratification. Now, I highlighted this part. Unfortunately, these compromises, regardless of their origins, the delegates' intentions, and several civil rights-inspired constitutional amendments remain to many evidence of a pro-slavery constitution. Exactly. Now, here's why. Okay? Because, you see, the Constitution that we have today is the same Constitution that they were using back then. All right? So if I'm a white person and I want African Americans, black people, to believe that the Constitution is not racist, how? When I'm using the same shit that racist people were using back then. I would then have to create a whole new constitution that would reflect a society that is totally devoid of racial inequities. That's what I would have to do. But they're not going to do that. Why? Because the Constitution was made for their benefit, not the benefit of black people. This is why. So we exist in a country that is defined by a racist document, which is a constitution, because a pro-slavery constitution is a racist constitution, and it is the same one that has been in use, in operation since 1789. So already, Stephen Philbrick and anybody that thinks like him, your shit is debunked. Anyway, let's continue. So the Three-Fifths Clause wasn't repealed until 1868, technically a lifetime and a half ago. All of this shit is recent years. So technically, my grandparents' parents, they existed in that time period. This is the era that they came from. We're not that removed from all of these things that took place. We're not. Anyway, written in 1892 was the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Which states, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Okay? Now, here's my thing with this. Okay? Because it says, with liberty and justice for all. And this was the part that stood out to me. Because when I was in elementary school, shit, I mean, what? Elementary school, middle school, high school, I think, every day they had niggas say that shit every morning. Every morning. Everybody got to stand up, find the flag, look at that shit, and recite that shit like a motherfucking drone or robot. Okay? And it says, with liberty and justice for all. Who the fuck are they talking about? Now, if you have been listening closely, you know exactly who they're talking about. They're talking about whites and non-blacks. That's who they were talking about. They were not talking about black people when they said with liberty and justice for all, because even back then, black people still didn't have any civil rights at that point. Didn't have any fucking human rights. Okay? Because shit, I love The Great Debaters, one of my favorite movies. I don't have that movie on DVD yet, but I will. Okay? And if for those of you that don't know, it is a film that is directed by the great, the legendary Denzel Washington, starring the great, the legendary Forrest Whitaker. Okay? And in that movie, you already see that at that point, which that movie, and if I'm not mistaken, doesn't even take place in the 1800s. That movie takes place in the 1900s. And black people were still second-class citizens. Still, because lynchings were still happening. They showed the shit. Okay? A black person being, hung, to roast after he was lynched under an open fire, surrounded by a whole bunch of white guys. Forrest Whitaker is driving his kids, back home from school, wherever it is that they're coming from. These white kids, okay, because they were in a southern state for sure. And they set it up as to where they had a pig run in front of their car just to create an altercation between the white guys and Forrest Whitaker and his family. And then knowing that, again, there were several racial inequities in, at that point in society, he had no choice but to give him his check for like, what I think it was like, what, $20, $18, $25? They had to give it to him because if not, they were going to die. And who was going to stop these people? To kill a black was nothing back then. To kill a black American was nothing back then. Absolutely nothing. But according to the Pledge of Allegiance at that point is liberty and justice for all. Black people didn't have any civil liberties. Black people weren't worthy of justice in the eyes of the country itself. So again, at this point right now, we can already say for 1,000% accuracy that any documents that describe the rights, the liberties, and justices for citizens of America, that does not apply to black people, because black people were never first-class citizens. So therefore, they were never counted. They don't count. They don't count. Because how many times were black people killed and lynched and persecuted by the KKK in 1892? Come on, man. We still got sunset towns right now. I be on TikTok. Niggas is like, yo, don't stop here. Yo, they're like, if you're trying to get to Vegas and you got to drive through here, they're like, don't stop, keep going. These places still exist and they're able to get away with it. Why? Because there are still racial inequities to this day. Because technically, if we're living in a country that everybody's equal, right? Liberty and justice for all, right? Then for a sunset town to still exist, technically that should be a federal crime. And I'm going to go into crimes a little bit later on, what the government should be doing if everything that they say is accurate, right? If I count, right? That should be a federal crime. Black people should be able to go wherever the fuck that they want, but they can't clearly in certain fucking places where these racist ideologies are being promoted and preserved. Right? But yet, if black people were to say, oh, okay, we have our own communities and white people are not allowed to be here past 6 o'clock, motherfuckers are going to be outraged. We tried to do the same thing from an economic standpoint, not even a racial standpoint, but an economic standpoint with Black Wall Street. And look what happened. I don't see them burning down the sunset towns. I don't see them burning down their fucking communities. But when we tried to do the same, our shit got freaking white from the face of existence. Right? Come on, man. Stop it. Stop it. I'm bodying this whole entire shit. Anyway, let's continue. Just years prior, in Dredd Scott versus Sanford in 1857. So this is not that much removed from when the Pledge of Allegiance was written. Now, for those of you who don't know what the case of Dredd Scott versus Sanford was, I'm going to explain it to you. In this ruling, the United States Supreme Court stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the courts. That in itself, does that not fucking reflect everything that has happened to black people since we fucking were brought here? Does that not reflect what is happening today? The last 10 years. Let me read it again. In this ruling, the United States Supreme Court stated that enslaved people, who the fuck were they talking about? Black people, were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the courts. The opinion also stated that Congress had no authority to ban slavery from a federal territory. Come on, man. Come on. It's all there. And when I was doing research, it said that, yo, this was one of the most controversial fucking, court decisions ever. One of them, because they were open about the shit. They were like, nah, yo, we don't rock with y'all. It was controversial because people thought that the government wouldn't be so forward with the shit, right? It's like they'll do some shit like the 3/5 compromise, but say, oh no, this was just for the sake of representation. You guys are still human, but niggas are still getting lynched, raped, and enslaved, not allowed to read and write. and edify themselves to put themselves on equal playing field as the whites, right? And they hit you over the head with it. I'm going to go on. So the story behind Dred Scott versus, the story versus Dredd versus Scott of 1857, it says in 1846, an enslaved black man named Dred Scott and his wife Harriet sued for their freedom in St. Louis Circuit Court. They claimed that they were free due to their residence in a free territory where slavery was prohibited. The odds were in their favor. They had lived with their enslaver, an army surgeon, at Fort Snelling, then in the free territory of Wisconsin. The Scots' freedom could be established on the grounds that they had been held in bondage for extended periods in a free territory and were then returned to a slave state. Courts had ruled this way in the past. However, what appeared to be a straightforward lawsuit between two private parties became an 11-year legal struggle that culminated in one of the most notorious decisions ever issued by the United States Supreme Court. And they're doing this shit every day. You know what I'm saying? Scott lost his case, which worked its way through the Missouri state courts. He then filed a new federal suit, which ultimately reached the Supreme Court. On its way to the Supreme Court, the Dred Scott case grew in scope and significance as slavery became the single most explosive issue in American politics. By the time the case reached the High Court, it had come to have enormous political implications for the entire nation. On March 6, 1857, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney read the majority opinion of the court, which stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the courts. The opinion also stated that the Congress had no authority to ban slavery from federal territory. This decision moved the nation a step closer to the Civil War. Now, no, it didn't, because, again, the motivations behind the Civil War, again, had nothing fucking to do with slavery whatsoever. At least, no, that's not why they fought the shit, okay? Because, again, after the motherfucking Civil War, black people were still second-class citizens, so that shit is fucking debunked. Okay, even though black people might have, fought in the shit, right? Now, I want to go back, okay? Because it says, at that point, so this happened, they reached a decision on March 6, 1857, and which stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States, right? Okay? But the 3/5 fucking, compromise, which was, which was of the 1700s, 1787, okay? Which, again, said that black people were 3/5 of a person, okay? So, according to Stephen Philbrick, oh, no. Black people were whole persons. This was just for voting. This was just for representation. But according to the fucking Supreme Court in 1857, black people, they were not even citizens to begin with and could not expect any protection from the federal government or the fucking courts. Nigga, you put me in a motherfucking courtroom with a goddamn politician or these goddamn scholars, them niggas couldn't see me. You can't. So even to say that black people were 3/5 a fucking person, you weren't even that. You weren't even considered anything but property. But fucking property. Not a second class, but a third class citizen. If you would even consider that. So if a black person wants to say, right, that they were considered 3/5 a fucking person, they are entitled to that. Because history and the facts can prove such. But to me, to say a black person was 3/5 a citizen is more than what the Supreme Court said that black people were to begin with, that they were not citizens to begin with. They were not considered citizens. They were not considered humans, which was why the human rights of black people were ignored, denied, ridiculed, rejected, spat upon. This is exactly why. And I'm making a grander, broader, overarching point, but y'all already know where I'm going with this shit. Now it says, the decision of Scott v. Sanford, considered by legal scholars to be the worst ever rendered by the Supreme Court was overturned by the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, which abolished slavery and declared all persons born in the United States to be citizens of the United States. All right. Now, here's my thing. Okay. All right. And I want to read that again. One more time. Well, I'm just going to emphasize one point. So it says, considered by many legal scholars to be the worst ever rendered by the Supreme Court, was overturned by the 14th and 13th Amendments to the Constitution and declared all persons born in the United States to be citizens of the United States. All right, now let me back up here. Let me spin the block, okay? Because the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. But you got to keep in mind again the racial climate of the United States at that time. So even if they were to again create the 14th fucking amendment, right? It doesn't specifically mention black people in any way, right? And back then, again, if you were a black person and you were walking around in a white community, you were going to be harassed, you were going to be heckled, beaten up, raped, okay, killed, lynched. Like, so the 14th Amendment, again, doesn't apply to black people, because if it did, then black people would not have been persecuted back in the 1800s. Shit was still going on until the mid fucking, the mid 1900s. Let's be real. Because you see, it says de jure segregation mandated the separation of races by law and was the form imposed by United States in slave codes before the Civil War and by black codes and Jim Crow laws following the war, primarily in the southern United States, which is why, again, black people were trying to get to the north and wanted to be in the north, because it wasn't, racism was still, out here in the north, but it wasn't as, prevalent or outward or hardcore. Now, it says de jure segregation was outlawed by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. You see that? That was only 58 years ago. 58 years ago. So if you're listening to this, your parents, if they're old enough, were alive when they didn't have Civil Rights Act, they didn't have voting rights, and then they didn't even have a right to fair housing, which is basically to have equal facilities, which, again, black people didn't fucking have. I mean, dare I say they still don't have now, because look at ghettos, look at project communities. Look at those, and then look at, let's say, Jewish communities, for instance. I'm just saying. This is just what it is. So I'm saying that to emphasize again how recent these things are. So it's like we're still living in this era right now, because all of this shit was happening again 58 years ago. Michael Jackson would have just turned 63 years old. That's the era that he came from. Michael Jackson was born in Gary, Indiana, and his parents were born in the 20s, the late 20s, 1929 and 1930. That's the era that they came from. New Edition, they were born in the 60s. And then even they will tell you, Ralph Tresvant was born in 1968. And then they were living in Boston, Roxbury, Boston. And then he said that when black kids were being put in white schools back then, they were getting stones, all types of objects being thrown at their school buses. They had to be escorted to school. And where's Boston? Up north. And these things were still happening. And it was okay. It was okay. Yeah, sure, the police were escorting them, right? But did they want to? No. I'm pretty sure if you gave them a choice, they would not have been escorting them. I'm pretty sure they would have probably found better things to do with their time. Right? Now, here's my issue. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this quick take in the first place, at least it wasn't the impetus, but it was a part of my motivation for doing this. Now, I checked out of doing quick takes on these topics because, again, to me, they were too disheartening because you see me, I'm a black person and I'm a forward thinking black person. Because when I see other black men, other black women, and black kids, you see, even though I don't know them, I have an inherent respect for my fellow black person because I know that we are the same. All right. And I have an understanding of our history from a biological standpoint, from a historical standpoint, and a racial standpoint for me to understand that the last thing that I need to be doing is warring with another black person, battling another black person. That is the last thing I need to do because let's just say in America specifically, I know that it's literally just us on an island, even though media will have you think otherwise. Politicians like, Kamala Harris and Tim Scott will have you think otherwise. But I understand it is whites, Latinos, Asians, Indians, and mulattoes against us. This is facts. And I'm not saying that to say that, oh, every single one of the aforementioned is racist. I'm not saying that. But I understand that these people, from a biological and racial standpoint, all exist on one playing field, even though they might not see each other as the same, but a white person looks at a Chinese person and says, at least he's not black. An Indian person looks at a white person and says, he's not black. They look at us and say, they are black, and they automatically view us differently. All right? Because I was just having this conversation with my mother. And I said to her, because she told me that she does not see color, which from a philosophical standpoint, a moral standpoint, that is a sound thing to say, okay? But that's not the world through which we exist and operate and function in. Because I said to her, I said, well, if I had children, wouldn't I be doing my kids a disservice by telling them, oh, don't see color, right? Because they are going to be living in a world that is going to look at them by their skin color. Because I'm going to be having kids with a black woman. I'm going to be, in a long-term spiritual partnership, romantic partnership with a black woman. So my kids are going to be black off rip. So why would I set them up for that type of failure by telling them, oh, don't see color, when everybody is going to see them as the color that they are, which is black, a melanated being? And I emphasize my point with this, and I'm going to briefly give this anecdote before I read this article. Now, 2 years ago, was it February? Yeah. No, this was March. Yeah, this was March of 2024. Long story short, I was in Queens, which is New York, for those of you who don't know, but y'all know. And I was in a car with an ex-girlfriend. We were coming back from karaoke. It was about 2:30 in the morning. Let's say 2:15 a.m. Coming back from karaoke, going home. I was staying at her house that night. And, she had a little bit too much to drink. So she was, speeding, home and stuff like that. I don't know what the hell the rush was, but, again, she was speeding. She had a little liquor courage in her. Me, knowing what I know, I'm a bit nervous because her car is loud and I'm in an area that, again, like I kind of feel like I'm from Queens because I spent so much time there, and a lot of my friends are from Queens or Brooklyn. So it's like all my people are there. I spent, 10,000 hours there. I've slept there. So it's like I feel like I'm of Queens more so than the area that I'm from right now, because from a social standpoint, from a comfort, perspective, I feel more comfortable there, and I feel more in alignment with Queens than here. But I'm looking around in the car. I'm like, yo, she's speeding, burning red lights. Shit, I'm looking for the cops because I know they somewhere, looking by. And I was right. They were, because less than 2 minutes later, by the time we got in front of our house, the police was behind us. Okay. Now, my ex-girlfriend was a black woman. Anyway, the cops pulled me out of the car and I was sitting in the passenger seat. I wasn't even driving the car. All right. And so it's 4 police officers. The white police officer is talking to my ex, and it's 2 Latino, I think it was either 2 or 3 Latino police officers, 1 black guy, and then there was me. and I think either one white police officer, but again, his skin was pale, so he was either white or Latino, but I'm willing to bank that he was Latino, right? And so they were telling me, oh yeah, why were you looking around? Like why you look so nervous? And I'm like, because she, burned a red light. I'm not from here. It's 2:30 in the morning. If anything bad is going to happen, it's going to happen right now. And sure enough, look where we at, right? And I remember I put my hands in my pockets. They were like, please take your hands out of your pockets. I remember I crossed my arms. They were like, nope, put your arms down. You see what I'm saying? So off rip, I was racially profiled for being a black man, a tall black man at that, because I'm 6'4", 6'5". You see what I'm saying? So it's not even driving while black. I was sitting while black. So the reason why I brought that up was because now, of course, I was kind of surprised that they pulled me out of the car, but I wasn't really surprised. Why? Because I already have had a thorough understanding of the racial dynamics of this country, especially with law enforcement. So I wasn't in shock like she was. I wasn't in shock. I knew what was up. I knew exactly what was up. All right? But if I had my mother's ideology, bro, I would have been distraught. I would have been crying. I would have been, oh, but why'd they do that to me? I'm just a human being like everybody else. No, nigga. Bro, I was black. Okay? She was speeding. They didn't, for all they knew, I was probably trying to get away somewhere. You see what I'm saying? So this is why they fucking pulled me out of the car. But I bet you if it was a white boy, they wouldn't have asked him to get out of the car. They probably would have just gave a ticket for that. Now, the only reason why they let me go, and I'm going to tell you what it was. Get some water. The only reason why they let me go was divine intervention. Shout outs to my ancestors. Because my friends pulled up right next to us. Yeah, I didn't even know that they were coming. Again, divine intervention. They pulled up, and then they were like, yo, Dimitri, you good? And then I just looked at them. The cop said, all right, you can go. But imagine what that situation would have been if my friends, which was a car full of people, I'm talking about 5 people in that car, witnesses now, if they didn't show up, they could have brought me downtown. They could have been like, you know what? I think you kind of fit the profile of this guy that we're looking for. We're gonna need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent. Put me in cuffs, and I would have been in a jail cell somewhere. But according to people like my mother, no shade, but I'm just saying that racism is not a thing. Color is not a thing. Racism is non-existent. We live in a post-racial society because, we were integrated into a society that they didn't even want us in the first place. And they were very vocal about that. They were very vocal about that. According to Stephen Philbrick, we are, by me saying that, right, I am intensifying a social divide. How? When I wasn't the one that created it. I'm just responding to the social divide. I'm just pointing out the racial climate. That's all I'm doing. And all I got to do is look on the news to see the same thing. Now, I have an article courtesy of CNN.com, which says, South Carolina jury finds store owner not guilty of murder in killing a black teen. The article goes on to say, a South Carolina jury on Monday found a store owner not guilty of murder in the 2023 shooting of a black 14-year-old. Now, again, these things happen so often your head would spin because I was still reporting on these instances back then, and I think I probably heard about it, but again, I'm just like another one. Oh my god, bro, I just had this conversation yesterday, and it says the jury returned the verdict for Chike Rick Chow. Chow, 61, who is Asian, shot Cyrus Carmack-Belton in the back after chasing him from his convenience store in Columbia, but maintained he acted to defend his son. All right. It says the killing sent waves of anguish and grief through the African-American community in Richland County, where nearly half the population is black. And this should remind me of Do the Right Thing, except, the fucking, the store owner didn't kill anybody. It was the cops that did. It says after the verdict was read, sobs and cries of distress could be heard coming from Carmack-Belton's family seated in the gallery. Chow sat silently, frozen, before slowly bowing his head onto his interlocked hands. Shit, he was thanking God he was Asian and he wasn't black. Because if he was black, he would have been in jail. Damn right. Prosecutors and a defense lawyer in closing arguments painted different pictures of the 2023 shooting. Prosecutors said Chow acted in anger because he wrongly thought the teen had stolen 4 bottles of water from the store, which doesn't even equate to $10. A defense lawyer said Chow fired. A defense lawyer said Chow fired to defend his son only after the teen pointed a gun at him, which again they couldn't prove that he had a gun. Okay, which from what I read, like, you know what I'm saying. It says the case is not about a shoplifter. This case is about a father who sees a gun pointed at his son and had to make a decision. Defense attorney Sean Kent told jurors during closing arguments, the defense attorney said Andy Chow testified that Carmack-Belton pointed a gun at him. How fucking convenient. It says prosecutors acknowledged Carmack-Belton. Oh, okay. Prosecutors acknowledged Carmack-Belton had a semi-automatic pistol, but they say it fell on the ground during the chase and he never threatened anyone with it. So he had a gun on him, but he didn't threaten anybody with the shit. It says prosecutors said Chow chased the teen more than 130 yards from the store. So basically, Mr. Chow was seeing red. Mr. Chow already had it in his mind that he wanted to kill him, chasing him that far. You know what I'm saying? Solicitor Byron E. Gibson told jurors that Chow chased the kid down and shot him in the back. Now, my thing is this. It's not like we're talking about Bishop from Juice. Okay? Because if dude was really that much of a threat, he would have shot him. If you have a semi-automatic pistol, then bro, that means you pull the trigger, it's gonna fire multiple shots. It's not like he has to keep pressing it and pressing it and pressing it. No, he had the advantage clearly. If that was the case, if he really had intent to kill, he would have shot him already. You know what I'm saying? It's like when it's like in Juice, when Tupac goes to the store, old man Quillez freaking had his back turned. Tupac already had it in his mind that he wanted to kill him. It didn't take that long, even though Quillez had a gun on him. They knew that. And this is why he came in to kill him. It says during closing arguments, Gibson placed a bottle of water before jurors. Gibson said that Chow, at the end of the day, believed that a human is not more than that, which is facts. And I mean, clearly, historically, we already see how blacks are viewed as not human, non-citizens. So to kill a black person, it's not a big deal in the eyes of non-blacks, because all you got to say is, oh, well, he scared me. He was a threat to me. You see how tall he is? Oh, he had a gun. He had a knife. And you didn't even have to pull the shit out. All they have to do is say that you are a threat. And in the eyes of an anti-black government, that's all they need to hear to have your back. You know what I'm saying? That's all they need to hear. Now, it says, Gibson said, multiple witnesses testified they didn't see anything in Carmack-Belton's hands and didn't see him point a gun as he ran from the store. So witnesses can corroborate the fact that he didn't even do anything to threaten that man. I mean, probably beyond having a verbal altercation, you know, and he ran from the fucking store. And it's not like he had the water bottles fucking with him. So why, you know what I'm saying? So what was the point in chasing him that far? If that was the case, why didn't Mr. Chow just call the police and have the police handle it? It's because he felt that he was within rights to kill the boy because Rick Chow does not like black people, which I'm going to prove my point in a little bit in a couple of moments. He says nobody testified that happened that doesn't have the last name Chow. It says the fatal shooting prompted vigils and protests outside the store. Empty water bottles were arranged to spell out Cyrus at 1/2023 vigil. Now, here's my point that I want to get across. Is something that Malcolm X was trying to get to in his lifetime, which was the conversation has to change in order for you to get change, right? Because you cannot say, I want justice, because it hasn't gotten us very far, clearly. And I'm not sure why no one has really even said this shit, even though I've been saying this shit for years, and I'm going to say it again definitively, because I don't think I'm going to be doing too many videos about this, because this is going to be it. for me for a while is what happened to this black boy. What happened to him was what I view as a racially motivated hate crime. I'm going to say it again. A racially motivated hate crime. Because what's his first name? What's his first name? It doesn't even have his first name. It doesn't have his Cyrus. Okay, Cyrus Carmack-Belton, because they kept saying his last name. But Cyrus Carmack-Belton was the victim of a racially motivated hate crime. Now, I know for some people that might be a broad term, but let me give you a definition of a hate crime according to the FBI. So the FBI says hate crimes are the highest priority of the FBI civil rights program because of the devastating impact they have on families and communities. Okay, it says a hate crime is a traditional offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with an added element of bias. Okay, a hate crime is a traditional offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with an added element of bias. The Bureau investigates hundreds of these cases every year, and we work to detect and prevent incidents through law enforcement training, public outreach, and partnerships with community groups. The FBI is authorized to investigate crimes in which the perpetrators acted based on a bias against the victim's race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or actual or perceived sexual orientation. Okay, it says against the victim's race, color, national origin. Sound familiar, don't it? The fact that he was black. Anyway, now, for the purposes of collecting statistics, the FBI has defined a hate crime as a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. Hate itself is not a crime, and the FBI is mindful of protecting freedom of speech and other civil liberties. Now, come on, bro. There are so many instances of what the FBI determines to be a hate crime because all it needs is an element of bias in order to motivate and act against somebody. Now, Rick Chow, I'm pretty sure if he had that same altercation with a white boy of the same age, that white boy would still be alive today because that Asian man, Rick Chow, would know I cannot just go and kill a white person because he knows that shit would have ended. He would have ended up in jail. That decision would have ended him up in jail. It is because he was going up against the bottom of the barrel from a racial standpoint in this country. He knew he had the upper hand. He knew he had the upper hand because Rick Chow's skin don't look like mine. I'm just saying. And I already know. Okay, because Rush Hour to me does not depict how Asians really feel about black people abroad. I already know that. That movie is a fairy tale. I wish it was like that. Hell, I would go to Heaven on Earth massage parlor, but I know that's not a real thing. That's just a movie. All right, because I literally just saw a video on social media, and it was really Instagram to be specific, and it was literally about Chinese people. Basically, what they were doing is they were creating these dolls that were of black kids, essentially like what a stress ball would be, but it's a doll that you can stretch, you can squeeze, you can beat up, you can do all of these things, you can mutilate it, you know what I'm saying? And like basically an object through which these people can take out their frustrations and aggressions upon. You know? Like a stress ball in the form of a black baby. And they were told or they were asked like, well, why don't you, make, one of these in the form of a white person or an Asian kid? And they said, no, because it would make it more human. It would make it more human. I'm going to put the clip right here.
I hope this makes you as angry as it makes us. There's a viral trend around a Natasha doll in China, a black baby stress toy. Chinese social media users are filming themselves squeezing, stretching, and brutalizing the doll for entertainment. When asked why the Natasha doll had to be black, one Chinese social media user responded that a white baby, for example, would be too human and people would feel bad for hurting it. The Natasha doll is disturbing as is, and now Chinese social media users are filming themselves with real-life Natasha dolls. There are so many videos and entire channels dedicated to showing Chinese people abusing black babies, and then laughing about it. Content creator Shalom M took a deep dive on the many ways in which Chinese social media has created an entire market for abusing, harassing, and dehumanizing African children on camera. She mentions how the BBC did an entire documentary on a Chinese man who was living in Malawi and filming children without the consent of their parents and selling those videos to said Chinese market. China has a great firewall on all social media apps that are not Chinese owned, so they have their own apps like Rednote, WeChat, and more. Which means a lot of the content posted on these Chinese social media apps stays within China and is specifically targeted towards a Chinese audience and what they like. There's an entire market of Chinese adults who enjoy watching videos of Black African children being abused. As our African leaders continue to welcome a nation that does not regard us as human beings, what can we do about it?
So that just goes to show you how the rest of the world views black people. Needless to say about the Middle East. Needless to say about, you know what I'm saying, Australia and how they treat their darker skinned, you know, Aboriginal people. All right. Now it says, the FBI has investigated what are now called hate crimes as far back as World War I. Our role increased following the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but lynching did not become a federal crime until March 29th, 2022. Let me say that again. Let me say that again. The FBI has investigated what are now called hate crimes as far back as World War I. Now let's see when World War I took place. When was World War I? So it says World War I lasted from July 28th, 1914 to November 11th, 1918. Okay? Now, who are these hate crimes that they're talking about? What are these hate crimes that they were investigating? Against who? Their own people. People that look like them. Because shit, black people were being fucking lynched for hundreds of years. But that shit did not become a federal crime until March 29th, 2022. My nigga, that was 4 years ago. My nigga, that was 4 fucking years ago. So do you see that black people are not counted? Do you see that black people are even less than a fucking afterthought? To say a black person or a black woman is an after fucking thought is an understatement. Because it says our role increased following the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it took you so long to acknowledge that lynching was a fucking hate crime until March 29, 2022. To me, that's a slap in the face. Like, you might as well not have. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you really shouldn't have. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't have. Like, y'all waited this long because clearly we've been surviving since. So and your protections don't mean much because black people are still getting lynched. Because what you think gonna happen? What will happen to a black person if they get caught slipping in a sunset town? Either go missing or found hanging from a tree. So that's not stopping nothing. It says black Americans make up the vast majority of victims of lynching, accounting for roughly 73%. Nearly 3,500 of documented lynchings. All right. So anybody else, any other group of people that has been a victim of lynching makes up the lesser percentage of that. So black people making up 73%. 73%. That's way more than half. And it was never acknowledged as a federal hate crime until March 29, 2022. But people like Stephen Philbrick, Tim Scott, Kamala Harris will have you believe that America is not a racist country and that we are whole beings and that we are not 3/5 of fucking a person, that we are not second-class citizens, third-class citizens, according to them. And I literally just debunked all of that. Watch my video questions for Malcolm X. I mean, me and Malcolm, we get into it. We do. We do. And you would honestly think, if somebody did not know better, you would think that I was really having a conversation with that man. Go look it up. It's in my video essays playlist. But let's continue. Most took place in the southern United States, acting as a system of racial control and economic suppression. Prominent victims of lynching include 14-year-old Emmett Till. We all know that story. Political activists, labor organizers, and successful black owners. You see what I'm saying? So this is why lynching was even a thing, is to suppress and oppress black people from a racial standpoint and an economic standpoint. It was all about control. All about control. Now, I'm going to make a correlation. But in order to make this correlation, I have to make a disclaimer, a very adamant disclaimer. Now, I'm putting this on wax. I'm putting this on record. I do not have anything personal against the Jewish community. I'm only making a comparison. I have no issue with the Jewish community whatsoever. I am only making a comparative discussion to make a point that I'm going to emphasize as it relates to black people. I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't believe that Jews are less than. I don't think that Jews deserve to die or anything like that. Okay? So I'm putting that on wax. I have no issue with the Jewish community, so I don't want anybody in here to think that the mere mention of a Jewish person means that I am anti-Semitic when I'm only actually making a fucking point. Because there is a disparity in treatment between black people and Jewish people. But shout out to the Jewish community, because I will say this. I'm going to give them their shout out, because hear me out. I'm not mad at Jewish people. You want to know why? Because, you see, I feel the way that Jewish people operate is exactly how black people should operate. But I feel the reason why black people have not operated as such is because black people have been racially controlled and economically suppressed. Okay? Because in my eyes, Jewish people are Caucasians. Okay? The United States and Israel have a great relationship. Why do you think that is? Because the United States of America is an extension of Europe. Okay? So really by default, the United States is a European, Eurocentric, Caucasian country. And so is Israel. I'm just saying. So they help each other. They work together. But when black people tried to do the same thing, which is establish their own communities, congregate amongst each other, they weren't allowed to do that. Shit, I mean, you look at the goddamn Black Panther Party, infiltrated, negated, ended, ceased to exist. I mean, you might have some, black empowerment groups out here, but come on, man. Look what happened. Malcolm X, Fred Hampton. Let's be real. So black people coming together, for the purpose of, social and political, activism, labor organizing, and for the sake of entrepreneurship, that was always curtailed, if I'm using the correct word. That was always disrupted, by the powers that be. But again, I feel that they set an example that black people should follow, to me, because I live in a community right now where there's a lot of Hasidic Jewish people, and I see them, the way that they operate from, again, a socio-economic standpoint, to me, is commendable. And I'm like, well, instead of being mad at them and criticizing them, how about we do the same thing amongst ourselves? And then we would prosper. Because, you see, and I know I'm deviating, I'm going to get right back to my point, but because, you see, when they, see one of their own on the side of the road and then they got their thumb up, one of their own stops for them. I'm pretty sure if a Jewish person were to be pulled over by the police, another Jewish person will come to his aid immediately and be there for him and support him. When Jewish people get married, they support each other economically. They do. They do. They support each other. Shit, I'm talking about, I worked at a bank. This young Jewish couple, they got married recently and shit like that. I'm talking about checks upon checks from family members, relatives, people from their congregation, all that shit, depositing $30,000, $35,000. Easy, just for the sake of getting married. They know how to lift each other up economically within this system. They know exactly what they're doing, and this is why I don't get mad at them. Even though, again, the system through which they operate, which is America, was built to suit them. This is why they were able to excel. This is why we're not, the rules of engagement are not the same. So yes, can I make a comparison? Sure, but it's not a fair comparison because we are not Caucasian. We are not Caucasian. And we don't have a sovereign country like in Israel that is going to look out for us the way that Israel looks out for them. See what I'm saying? Because they'll come here and they go back and forth to their motherland, but we don't have one of any sort of sovereign power, that is acknowledged on the world stage where we can go. We don't have a Wakanda. We don't have a Zamunda. We don't have one of those, at least not yet, unless I just happen to become a trillionaire and then I will establish my own country and unify Africa. For damn sure I would. People ask me if I had 3 wishes, what would I do? I'm like, yeah, I would become a trillionaire. I would go to Africa and I would unite Africa. Africa has about 52 or 53 countries in it. We don't need that many. I'm sorry. And then if you don't like it, then you can go because we're going to consolidate and unify. I'm not saying everybody's got to go, but there's a lot of people that are going to go. And we have to come together. Haiti, Jamaica, Caribbean countries, you guys are now a part of us. Don't worry about America because America never gave you the help that you needed. France definitely didn't give you the help that you needed because you're paying reparations, restitution to them for getting your independence to this day. And people want to know why Haiti is disenfranchised and fucked up the way that it is. That's because Haiti was forced to pay restitution to France for getting their independence from them. So economically, Haiti was set up for failure from the point that they got their independence. They got their independence, but they lost everything in the process. Haiti is a joke from an economic, political standpoint. Nobody acknowledges Haiti on the world stage. And every time you hear about Haiti, it's something bad. But the history of Haiti is a whole separate discussion. But anyway, I'm making my point again. So it says, okay. So here's my thing. On state.gov, which is, again, an official government website, they have a definition for anti-Semitism, which, again, to me, I don't believe any group of people should be persecuted for, again, who they are, their religious beliefs. This is not an attack on Jewish people. This is just to emphasize my point. But their definition of anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property toward Jewish community, institutions, and religious facilities. So they already have a term for hate crimes against Jewish people. There is no term for hate crimes against Black people. There is none. And you know why there is for them is because, again, they are Caucasian. That's the point that I'm making. All right. They acknowledge the plight of them because have they been persecuted? Yes, they are. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is we don't have anything for us and we won't. You know what I'm saying? And here's the thing. Now, according to them, sometimes called the quote unquote, the longest hatred, anti-Semitism has persisted in many forms for over 2,000 years. The racial anti-Semitism of the National Socialists, Nazis, took hatred of Jews to a genocidal extreme. Yet the Holocaust began with the words and ideas, stereotypes, sinister cartoons, and the gradual spread of hate. Now, let's just be real. Let's just be honest. That is false. To say that they have been on the receiving end of the longest hatred is false. That is false. That is absolutely false. You want to know why? Because I said, how could they have suffered the longest hatred when the trans-Saharan slave trade happened over 5,000 years ago? Because you see, a lot of people think that when people think about slavery, they automatically assume the transatlantic slave trade, which was, Africans being brought from West Africa across the Atlantic to the Americas and the Caribbeans too. That's what they think. When no, okay, because you see, Europeans did not start slavery. They got put onto slavery by Middle Eastern Arabs. That's who introduced them to the economic, possibilities and benefits of slavery. Because according to link.springer.com, it says a proportion of 1/4 to 1/2 of North Africans. Okay, wait, no, let me rephrase it. A proportion of 1/4 to 1/2 of North African female pool is made up of typical sub-Saharan lineages in higher frequencies as geographic proximity to sub-Saharan Africa increases. The Sahara was a strong geographical barrier against gene flow, at least since 5,000 years ago, when desertification affected a larger region, but the Arab trans-Saharan slave trade could have facilitated enormously this migration of lineages. Till now, the genetic consequences of these forced trans-Saharan movements of people have not been ascertained. Okay? So therefore, the trans-Saharan slave trade predates the alleged timeline of the longest hatred by 3,000 years. By 3,000 years. So according to them, they went through 2,000 years of hatred. Not to say that they didn't. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying our hatred came way before that. That's what I'm saying. We were bigger victims than you, right? But our plight was never acknowledged and glossed over, especially now, where people multiculturalize the Black experience. People multiculturalize Blackness by calling people POCs and saying that, oh, well, from the darkness came the light, and everybody is a variant of Black people, so therefore we are all POCs and persons of color. So then now our plight and our struggles don't get acknowledged because everybody is Black now. So when they're dealing with, these issues and social inequities, our shit gets put in the back of the bus, pun intended. Pun intended. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, that's the point. That's the point that I was making. That, okay, so you see that even with everything I've said thus far, Black people don't even have a name for what we go through. We don't have any legislation for what we go through. We've never got any reparations for what we went through. Nada. Nothing. The bare minimum. The bare minimum. That's how we're treated. Now, not to say that the aforementioned is not, but I'm saying that the fact that we haven't gotten a fraction of what they've gotten, it further emphasizes my point and my observation and my calling out of racial and social economic inequities. Okay? Now, to even further prove my point, Asians, people like Rick Chow, I said Asian people have legislation that protects them, i.e. the Stop Asian Hate Act. Following the spread of COVID-19 in 2020, there has been a dramatic increase, according to them, in hate crimes and violence against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. According to a recent report, there were nearly 3,800 reported cases of anti-Asian discrimination and incidents related to COVID-19 between March 19, 2020 and February 28, 2021. In all 50 states and the District of Columbia. During this time, race has been cited as the primary reason for discrimination, making up over 90% of incidents. And the United States condemns and denounces any and all anti-Asian and Pacific Islander sentiment in any form. Roughly 36% of these incidents took place at a business, and more than 2 million Asian American businesses have contributed to the diverse fabric of American life. More than 1.9 million Asian American and Pacific Islander older adults, particularly those older adults who are recent immigrants or have limited English proficiency, may face even greater challenges in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, including discrimination, economic insecurity, and language isolation. In the midst of this alarming surge in anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents, a shooter murdered the following 8 people in the Atlanta, Georgia region, 7 of whom were women and 6 of whom were women of Asian descent. In the midst of this alarming surge in anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents. Okay, yeah, all right, sorry. I copy and pasted that twice. All right. So they got legislation right away. It didn't take them all that long for them to get something to protect them from a state and federal standpoint from these things to happen. Because I said the Atlanta spa shooting that took place on March 16, 2021, it only took them 2 months to create legislation, but black people have been accosted hundreds of times in what can be proved as racially motivated acts of violence, and nothing has been given from a legislative standpoint in response. But according to Stephen Philbrick, black people are trying to distort interpretations of the Constitution when in reality, we've been calling out the actions of this country and their own blatant disregard for their Constitution, which is supposedly held in high regard, but totally ignored and distorted at their own personal leisure and discretion as relates to black people. All right? This is what I'm saying. Because that shooting happened March 16th. The Stop Asian Hate Crime Act was passed by May of fucking 2021. 2 months. It didn't take that long for the United States to act. You know why? Because the Constitution and the amendments, Bill of Rights, they apply to Asians. They apply to non-blacks. They don't apply to us. They don't. They don't. Because you see, like for example, George Zimmerman, and I don't even know what his descent is. I mean, because clearly he's not black. Okay, he's Latino. Okay, now he's somebody that killed Trayvon Martin. That was huge. That was a huge deal back then in 2012, 2013. That was a huge deal. And he was found not guilty of murder, right? Now, most recently, again, these are things that have been happening lately that have caught my attention that I'm mentioning for the sake of my point. Karmelo Anthony was someone who basically got into an altercation with a 17-year-old white boy at a track meet, and Karmelo Anthony stabbed the white boy because he felt that he was threatened. Okay, now I'm just going to read the article for the sake of, clarity purposes, and for the people who might not know the situation. But it says, a Texas teenager, this is courtesy of CNN.com. It says a Texas teenager who fatally stabbed a 17-year-old track athlete from a rival team during a high school meet was convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison on Tuesday in a case that drew wide attention beyond the booming Dallas suburb where they were students. A jury rejected Karmelo Anthony's claims of self-defense during a confrontation with Austin Metcalf in stadium bleachers last year. Most people who testified were students who described a heated exchange over Anthony's refusal on a rainy spring day to leave a tent that belonged to Metcalf's team. Anthony, now 19, did not testify at trial, and only his mother took the stand during the sentencing phase, telling jurors her son was sorry and asking for their mercy. Notoriety about the case spread, in part because of a flood of social media posts that amplified the killing in racial terms. Anthony is black, Metcalf was white. Lawyers on both sides, however, told jurors that the tragedy had nothing to do with race. Okay, so you see, before I even continue, what I don't like about people, and this goes so much past, the conversation about, politics and things like that. But what I don't like about what people do a lot, and people are so fucking convenient with this shit, is people, blacks too, decide to, they pick and choose when to acknowledge race when it fucking suits their narrative, right? They think race matters when it matters to them. But outside of that, the shit don't matter. Okay? Because to say that the tragedy of what happened to Cyrus, being killed by Rick Chow, to say that had that whole incident had nothing to do with race is fucking false. Okay? To say that George Zimmerman didn't fucking, racially profile Trayvon Martin and shoot him, nigga, that shit was fucking racially motivated. Dare I say, bro, the United States of America has to be damn near, if not number one, in terms of the most racist country ever. You know why I say that? Because during the Holocaust, World War II, and I remember when I was in social studies and I learned about propaganda and everything. Okay? I remember we learned how the United States used to make propaganda art about the Nazis, and then the Nazis used to do the same thing about fucking the United States. And you know what they did? I remember it was like this big metal, like machine thing. And then what did the shit have? It was wearing a KKK cloak. A KKK cloak. So it's like, basically the Nazis saying, you want to talk about us, but look at you and your history. We know what you're doing over there too, but how can you talk about us when your slate is not clean? Your hands are not clean. Your hands have blood on theirs just like ours do. This whole world is defined by race. Race is not only a social construct, which it is, but it also denotes biology. We cannot escape science. We are all different. We are not all the same. We are humanoids, but we are different genetic variants of the humanoid expression of genetics. We are all different. I am not the same as Rick Chow. I am not the same as Metcalf. We are different. We are humanoids, but I am different than them. Because what is the whole use of the scientific term a haplogroup if we're all the fucking same? Then what is the point of all of that? I have a whole video of whether or not a race is a social construct or a biological term. I have a whole quick take on it with two other guys that are in relationships with white women, and one of them has a biracial son. We got into it a whole hour and a half. Y'all can go listen to it. I know what the fuck I'm talking about. These instances are racially fucking motivated because you got one guy who's black and you got another guy who's white. They're already entering this confrontation from two opposite sides of the spectrum because they are identifying each other as something different than them. I highly doubt. I mean, even though black people do kill each other, and we know that black on black violence is a thing, or at least in-house black on black hostility is a thing. What I like to call it. I'm pretty sure Metcalf wouldn't have been on if let's say Anthony was or Carmelo was a white boy. I don't think he would have been on him like that. I don't think so. I don't know the situation. Can I say that Anthony was right for being in the tent of an opposing team? No. Was he right for having a knife on him? Again, I don't know his reasoning for that. But I can say with 100% accuracy that this was racially motivated. And in the judicial system, which is, run by white people, and the judicial system abides by a pro-slavery constitution, why would the rules of engagement be fair in this instance? Why would they be fair? They told you in the Constitution who they acknowledge. And it's not people like Karmelo Anthony. It's not people like me. It's not. It is not. So when you have a black person versus a white person or a Indian person, an Asian person, bro, it's a wrap. Unless you're a multimillionaire and you're black. That's the only way. That is the only way where it, you know what I'm saying? Like you could level the playing field a little bit. And then even then. So it says Jeff Metcalf, Austin's father, had also criticized those who sought to stoke racial division after his son was killed. A year later, he said again in court that it was never about race, while his voice swelled with anger over the death of his son. You failed your parents, you failed yourself, and you failed society, said Metcalf, looking at Anthony after the teenager was sentenced. Woo! All right. Let me respond to let me respond to his father. Or let me, yeah. Essentially, I'm responding to his father, or what I make of what his father said. He said, "You failed your parents, you failed yourself, and you failed society." Now, to me, I feel that that was a very ignorant thing to say of him, because let's just be honest, and this is facts, and I can speak to it. A lot of black people, not all, I'm not saying that this goes for every single black people, because there are a lot of, black boys and girls that are born into healthy families and healthy situations, where, they're not subjected to trauma and violence, and different things like that, right? There's a scene in Power Ghost, Star Show, that I liked. And it was a very profound scene that I wish, went viral, but it didn't. But in the philosophy class, I forgot what the fucking class was called, but it basically is a philosophical class. And essentially, they did an exercise where they had all the students line up in the front of the class. Okay? Or no, in the middle of the class. And the teacher, the professor, asked the students questions. And she said, based off of the answer, you're going to take a step forward or you're going to take a step back. And she would say, okay, take 2 steps back if your parents are divorced. Take 2 steps forward if your parents were together. Take 2 steps forward if your parents had, or take a step forward if your parents had a trust fund for you. Take a step backward if your parents didn't go to college. Take a step forward if your parents did go to college. Take a step backward if your parents have ever been convicted of a crime or went to jail. Take a step forward if your parents have a master's degree. Take a step forward if you so on and so forth. And at the end of the exercise, she said, this is where you start off in life. Some people start off ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, and some people don't even get to start at the fucking starting line. So some people start closer to the finish line and others start at the back. You see, and I'm just, again, speculating. And again, I want to talk about it with, again, sensitivity, because he's in jail now. All right? And again, I don't know. But for me, I'm assuming for him to feel the need to walk around with a knife is indicative of his environment. All right? Because if I walk around with a knife on me, right? Which I have knives. Do I walk around with them? No, I don't. But if I do, it's because I feel like I'm maneuvering in an environment where I do not feel safe. Okay? It's the same reason why it's like, you watch television shows, which are based off of real life, because art imitates life. And you'll see, how these characters, like they'll find a gun in his bag. And they're like, why you got that? Why? Because the kid doesn't feel safe. I can't speak to his upbringing, but what I can say is that I'm pretty sure Karmelo Anthony and Jeff Metcalf's son, Austin, they didn't start at the same playing field. They didn't start at the same playing field. Again, I don't know Karmelo Anthony's parents. I don't know them. Okay? But I cannot look at, let's say, a black kid that ends up in these dangerous situations where they end up, getting their life taken, or they take a life, or they end up in jail. I already know. I can't tell them that they failed themselves, or they failed society, or they failed their parents. No, nigga, they were fucking failed. They were failed. Okay? Like I said earlier, I spent a whole lot of time in Queens. In the community that I frequent, a young boy was beaten up and shot. And in my quick take, which y'all can listen to that too, I talk about these things all the time. I said that, sure, can I be mad at those kids that beat up that boy and killed him? Yes, I can be mad at them, but I have to also hold the parents and the environments that they came from accountable. I can't just look at them. They didn't just get there by themselves. They had to have been conditioned socially, mentally and emotionally to come out like that. They didn't just get there by themselves. You were raised by your parents. By no means am I blaming Karmelo Anthony's parents. I don't fucking know the situation. But I'm saying that him walking around with a knife and being ready to stab somebody is indicative of the environments that he frequented throughout his whole entire life. Period. And that is a concept, a narrative that, I'm sorry, white people will not understand. Some do. There are white people out there that exist, let's say therapists, for example, that will have empathy for, again, black people that come from broken homes, black people that don't have, mentors and people to look up to and different things like that. Sure, they not even empathy. They can sympathize, because empathy and sympathy is different. I feel like empathy is like a more, spiritual, naturally occurring, phenomenon. But sympathy is something you go out of your way to have for somebody. Somebody tells you something and then you give them sympathy in response. Empathy, you already had that for them anyway, before they even said something. Jeff Metcalf will never understand that, and I think that was a very unfair thing of him to say. That was very unfair for him to say. Very unfair for him to say that. Because you don't know what black people come from. You don't know the generational traumas that we go through at the hands of our own parents, at the hands of our own relatives, at the hands of people in our own community who are traumatized they themselves, and then you go to school with these people, and then they traumatize you because they're traumatized. And then if you're not strong enough, you're going to be defined by that trauma. And this is why certain black people go out into the world and they do certain things, because they are fucking traumatized. There was no intervention, by somebody that, could help them in some way, shape, or form. Nor did they have the thought to seek that, because that's not what they were taught, to seek help, to seek another way. That is facts. That the white experience for the average white American boy is a lot different than the average black American boy. It is not the same. It is not the same. I would have been like, how dare you say that? Like, okay, sure. Yes, you are totally justified in being angry and upset about your child's death. Absolutely. Because I don't think a white life is any less valuable than a black life. I don't think that. That's not my ideology. You know what I'm saying? My love for black people does not equate to a hatred for white people. I just understand what's going on out here. And then I move accordingly. That's it. But to say you failed your parents, you failed yourself, and you failed society, you cannot put his fucking parents, you know what I'm saying? His youth, his own youthful ignorance and society on his back and say you failed. This is why they fail. God damn it. This is why they fail. Because niggas come into this fucking world, their parents put their burdens on the back of their fucking kids, and then their parents say, we're putting our burdens onto you, and you're totally responsible for everything that you do in your fucking life. And then society puts its expectations on you as a fucking black boy. And then when you fucking fail, they say it's on you. That's not fair. That is not fucking fair. A white man can never fucking judge a black person's life ever, bro. Nigga, that's exact, like, yo, bro, that is exactly how they view us. Real shit. I'm not responsible for my parents, nigga. My parents are responsible for me. I'm not responsible for society. I don't owe society shit. Society, as we know, and again, we went into the Constitution and all of that. Technically, society should be responsible for me. Because what? Law enforcement is supposed to serve and protect. The Constitution is supposed to look out for me. So technically, by that fucking logic, society is supposed to look out for me. So if a fucking black person falls short, it's not their fucking fault. So if I, if let's say me, if I was one of those kids that let's say ends up in these situations, I was led to that by society and I was led to that by my fucking parents. I didn't fail. They failed me. They fucking failed me. Jeff Metcalf could not have a conversation with me about race, about life, about nothing. Because in that fucking statement, that clearly showed me that he knows nothing. You know absolutely nothing. See, I'm gonna quote Kingdom Hearts. Fucking Ansem's Heartless. Xehanor's Heartless says, one who knows nothing can understand nothing. You don't know nothing. My granddad says, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. All wisdom is the ability to know when to use knowledge. These niggas, how can you be wise if you don't have any knowledge? You wouldn't know when to use it because you don't have it. And if you don't have knowledge, then there's nothing for you to understand. Because a lot of people, anyway, they can only tell you what they know. Right? It's like I can't speak on an experience I never had. Right? I can talk about these things because it's my experience. I know, therefore I'm equipped to have this conversation. And to rebut anybody that tries to fucking, spoon feed me the fucking contrary. Because the truth is the truth. It's because people don't like the truth is why they just choose not to acknowledge it. But nigga, I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. Karmelo Anthony was failed. Karmelo Anthony did not fail himself. Because he's 17, 18. You don't know shit when you're 17, 18 years old. When I was 17, 18, nigga, I didn't know anything. I didn't know any. Oh, so he's 19. Even at 19, you're still a teenager. Nigga, I didn't know anything at 19 years old. I knew nothing at age 19. I'm telling you that right now. And what I thought I know, I didn't really know shit. I didn't know anything. I didn't know a goddamn thing at 19 years old. So you cannot, any sane adult, Jeff Metcalf, you cannot put so much on the back and the shoulders of a fucking 19-year-old. That's irresponsible. Like, I'm going to be so real with you. I'm going to be so fucking real and transparent with you. I had a father that, and I'm looking back at that now as a full adult, and that man used to put so much on me as a fucking kid through like all levels of what you would think a father-son relationship should be. It's like the conversations, the things said, the things done. These are not conversations and things that you say and do to a fucking teenager. What the fuck do I know about life? What the fuck do I know about anything at that age? But yet you have this expectation that, nigga, I'm supposed to know all of this shit? How the fuck am I gonna know about, dynamics that you had with my mother that y'all not together no more? It's like, why are you talking to me about this shit? Why is it my responsibility to help you navigate your fucking shit? Nigga, you a grown-ass adult. You 40, 50 plus years old, but yeah, I'm supposed to be helping you? Nigga, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. And then it's like, if you fall short, then the motherfucker's putting his hands up like, oh, well, I did everything I could do. Oh, if you fail, it's on you. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking first-hand experience. Niggas is talking to me about adult shit that is none of my, 7, 8, 9-year-old fucking business. Venting to me about shit. And then if I don't succeed in life, it's on me, according to him. According to him. I know what that's like. I can speak on that. I'm pretty sure that was not Austin's experience at all whatsoever. They don't know about that. Because, yeah, white households, to me, statistically, are most likely more healthy than black households. This is a fact. I grew up in a broken home. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not responsible for my parents. My parents are responsible for me. So when you see somebody who is not succeeding in life, Who's responsible for that? They didn't come into this earth asexually. They got here because of their parents. Your parents are supposed to help you for success. They're supposed to teach you, okay, when you get in this situation, this is what you do. This is how you operate so you can be safe. It's like, my nigga, like I know as a black person, if I get pulled over by the police and I'm in a situation with police officers, the way that I get home and I protect my safety is by doing what I'm supposed to be doing and moving with respect and allowing them to do their job so I could be sent on my fucking way. And this is coming from somebody where I've had numerous, run-ins with police, over the last years in terms of like, traffic stops and vehicular shit. So I know what I'm talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about because I know that, knowing what I know, I don't have any power. I have no power whatsoever in these situations. For crying out loud, I seen a video 2 days ago. Woman got pulled over by the police. I don't even know why she got pulled over. Police officer was trying to give her a citation or some shit like that, giving the guy a hard time. And then he gave it to her because he's like, yo, here's your ticket or whatever the fucking the paper was. She threw this shit out the window. The nigga says, all right, I'm about to arrest you now for littering. You don't have any power. And she tried to be like, nope, I'm not getting out this car. Ma'am, you are not Caucasian. You are not Caucasian. You are black. You are 3/5 a citizen according to the Constitution, according to history. You have no power in that situation. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's what it is. You don't have any power whatsoever. And I seen that and I was like, yo, like people are acting like we're really on the same level playing field as non-blacks, as white people. We're not. Because you see, in Questions for Malcolm X, I showed a white man being pulled over. Refused to comply with the police officers whatsoever. If I'm not mistaken, the motherfucker had a gun. It's in the intro. And first of all, the cops had flashlights and guns on him. He was like, put your gun down, holster it, holster your gun. The cop deadass put the gun away. And he drove off. He drove off. Scot-free. Cops didn't do nothing. Why? Because they respected that man's rights. I feel like in order for a cop to put hands on a white person, you really gotta wild out. You really gotta act crazy. And I'm not saying there aren't good cops out there. I know there are good cops out there that actually want to serve and protect, but I know they're not the majority of them. You know what I'm saying? Versus in that same video, because I cut back and forth. There's an Army veteran, probably active duty soldier or whatever, at a gas station, at the in his driver's seat. And the police officer's asking him to get out the car. They're pepper spraying him before he even got out the car. His hands are up. He's like, all right, I'm coming out the car. And they're like, I forgot what the fuck they were saying. Pepper spraying him. He's like, yo, I got my dog in the car, man. The dog in the back inhaling pepper spray and shit probably died in the damn car. That's not the same. It's not the same. The point that I'm proving. So until black people, first of all right, my call to action is this, and I would love for this video to get millions of views. I really do. I really do. Because I think black people would really benefit from the things that I have to say. And I will still carry this message with me in the future. So once I get a bigger microphone, I will say the same thing. Black people need to do a few things. The first, before you even try to get anything from the United States government, is this. Black people have to come together the same way you see every other single race come together amongst themselves. Because Americans, white Americans, know that they're the same as Jewish people. They might not have the same religious beliefs, but they know that they're the goddamn same. They know they're the same as Italians. They know they're the same as French. They know they're the same as Germans. They know they're the same as Russians. They know they're the same as Ukrainian people, especially that. You know why? Because the government was giving them billions of dollars in aid. Are they doing that for Haiti? Are they doing that for any sort of African country whatsoever? No, they were looking out for their people. Irish people, gone down. Swedish people, all that shit. Latinos, they know they're the fucking same. They practically speak the same fucking language. Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Mexicans, Hondurans, Guatemalan people, Portuguese people, fucking Spaniards, okay, who speak Spanish, because that's where all that shit comes from. Okay, Cubans, they all know they're the same. You know why? Because I briefly dated a Latino girl. Very briefly in 2021, like the end of 2021, I was seeing her. Took her to the diner. And I asked her, because again, this is my first time, dating a Latina chick, holding hands, kissing, doing all that. You know what I'm saying? And I asked her, I said, because she was there and she was talking to the whatchamacallit, the waiters in Spanish. And I'm like, oh shit, like they, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, I said, because I know that black people are divided as fuck. We're the most divided people. And I said, like, all right, like, you have Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and, Guatemalans and Honduran people and all that shit. El Salvadorians. I said, but y'all know y'all the same people, right? And she said, yeah. And I think she was Puerto Rican. If I'm not mistaken, she wasn't Dominican. So she was definitely Puerto Rican or something. And so that conversation was proof in and of itself. I even dated a girl whose mother is black, and then her father was Dominican. Okay, probably a Eurocentric Dominican. Okay, and same thing. Took her to another diner, because I love diners and shit. And she was doing the same thing, but she was more so on the Afro-Latino spectrum. But she's more of African descent because her mother is African. DNA runs matrilineally, so yeah. But she was talking to them in Spanish. So, and I said, oh, same thing. She'll come up in there and knows that they basically the same, or she can relate. She's not the same as them genetically, but she can relate to them from a cultural standpoint. Because all of these terms in these different countries that I'm mentioning, they only denote culture and geography. You know what I'm saying? They don't denote genetics, right? But she can still connect with them verbally or linguistically. And let's say Asians, same thing. Okay? Because Japanese people look like Chinese people. Chinese people look like Filipino people. Filipino people look like North and South Korean people. If they had to come together, even though I know they don't actually really get along like that, but if they had to come together, they would for the greater good. And that rhymes. So I'm headed somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Black people are the only culture of people that just are so hostile towards each other. And to me, it is so sickening. It is not even funny. It's so fucking sickening how bad it is. It is horrible. And I've said for years, like this is not my first time saying this shit. I said there's so much that separates black people and not enough that can bring us together. And they're coming up with new ways to separate us. And I've never actually spoken on this specifically on this channel, but I am going to do that now briefly. I might expound on it a little bit more, but I'm going to bring this up because you see, I believe in what's called industry plants. I really do. I really do. And let's say, for instance, when you look at a show like Snowfall, right? The CIA in the show, Teddy, was the one who was fueling everything that Franklin was doing. Damson Idris, shout outs to him, on the damn show. So they were in on it, right? It's like, how can you have a war on drugs when the people that would wage war on drugs are the ones that are putting drugs in the community? They're the ones behind it all. They're the master hand. Now, when you have, let's say, like different artists today, and they come out of nowhere, but then they all of a sudden become the greatest thing since sliced bread. What I learned is that is the result of social engineering. And what is social engineering? The only reason why Drake is basically one of the biggest rappers out right now. He is the product of industry placement and social engineering. Here's why. When Drake first came out, Who did Drake come behind? Who put Drake on? Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne was arguably, I mean, shit, to me, he was the best rapper during that era, for sure. Lil Wayne was on fire, back in that day. And I'm like, yo, back in the day, I used to listen to a lot of Dipset, but if it wasn't for Dipset, I was listening to Show Me What You Got, Lil Wayne remixes and One Blood remixes and shit. Like that, Lil Wayne was that guy. But in order for them to successfully social engineer Drake, they had to put him next to the biggest rapper at that point. And make that rapper give him the cosign. Because out of all of them, Drake was the one that really blew up. It wasn't Tyga. It wasn't all, Bow Wow, who was on Young Money for a little while. It wasn't Lloyd. It wasn't Pleasure P. You know what I'm saying? Even though Nicki was huge, but who's really making the most noise now out of all of them is Drake. And then arguably from a career commercial standpoint, Drake surpassed Lil Wayne. Commercially, at least, because he transcended, the black audience. Even though Lil Wayne went pop too, but Drake took that baton and took it to the next level. But he is the result of social engineering from a very long time, because the nigga was on Degrassi. Now you take that and you apply it to all of these new artists now who are not even good. Okay, because back in the day, you had to be talented to be good. You had to have aura to be good. A lot of these artists now, you just take them, you put them next to somebody that's popular, you inflate their views and numbers to make them look lit, and people psychologically are going to want to go with the most popular thing than the one that's not popular, right? So you see a video that has 1 million views, people are going to be more likely to watch that because everybody else is watching it than the video that only has 100 views. They don't want to watch it because they don't feel like anybody else is watching it, so they won't watch it, right? Now, I say that to say this. Foundational Black Americans, which to me is a harmful psy-op done at the hands of Tariq Nasheed. Okay? And the reason why I say it's harmful is not because people are not entitled to reparations. I'm like, bro, if you can get fucking reparations, get reparations if you can prove you're entitled to get reparations, which I don't think black people are going to get much of, because if you haven't gotten it now, when the fuck are you going to get it? You know what I'm saying? And I believe reparations should be given in the form of not cash, but actual resources that could really put black people ahead from an academic, economic, social standpoint. But the reason why I don't like that agenda, because again, both of my parents are Caribbean, and then blacks were brought to the Caribbean from West, Central, and East Africa. So my ancestors, as far as I know, are not native to the Americas. My ancestors are from West, Central, and East Africa. That's where my ancestors come from. Okay, I jack that. You know what I'm saying? I know where I come from historically. I might not know my ancestors by name, but I know, who I know what they are and where they come from, basically. But I don't like when you're mad at somebody because geographically they come from a different place than you do. And it's like, again, you cannot even prove that you are actually native to the Americas. Genetically, you can't prove that. What can be proved is that you are a descendant of a enslaved or a freedman. That's what you can prove. But black people cannot prove scientifically or genetically that they are the descendants of Africans who are native to the Americas. That cannot be proven. That cannot be proven. Because if we want to use science, okay, black people descend from the mitochondrial Eve, who comes from Central Africa, okay, Sub-Saharan Africa, 250,000 years ago. Science proves that. Okay, we are the result of the mitochondrial Eve, who we descend from, who gave birth to us, or who began, the life of blacks through parthenogenesis, which is asexual reproduction. Black women are not capable of that anymore. Okay, because again, we're hundreds of thousands of years removed from that. Okay, so all sperm does is remind the black woman's body of what it used to be able to do by itself. So again, I don't like black people attacking other black people because they are from a different area than them. To me, that's no different than Bloods and Crips. So you got one black person who wants to kill the other black person because they're wearing a certain color. You know how fucking stupid that is? How dumb that is? That's stupid. Yes, in Africa, there were different tribes, different subcultures and all of that. But that doesn't fucking mean I gotta fucking battle you for that shit. Cause it's like, bitch, I'm gonna tell her of what? Cause first of all, nigga, I was born and fucking raised in motherfucking America. And nigga, I don't speak Creole. You know what I'm saying? So how the fuck am I a motherfucking teller when nigga I was born and raised in this motherfucker? You see what I'm saying? So to me, that whole narrative is fucking stupid, and you only hear dumbass black people doing that shit because it makes them feel better, because psychologically, everybody wants to feel like they belong to something. So the foundational black Americans gives them a sense of identity and a sense of superiority, right? Because think about it, it's like Nazis created the Aryan race to give themselves a sense of superiority, but they're committing genocide against people that look just like them. Because I think they said that Hitler's like, what his fucking like mother or some shit, or his grandmother was Jewish or something like that, or he didn't even fit the description of the shit that he thought was the pure most perfect race ever. He wasn't blonde haired and blue eyed, so what the fuck are you even talking about? And I'm pretty sure, again, you know, black people tens of thousands of years ago did not give a fuck about dumbass shit like that. Again, what these terms do is it just keeps black people from ever coming together because we're too busy worrying about dumb ass shit. Do I think people should respect other people's cultures? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But do I think that we should be fighting each other over that shit? Hell the motherfuck no. I don't think so. And I say that, I bring them up because I think dumbass shit like that is what keeps us, you know, it gets in the way of the unity that I want to see us have. Because that's not a sound ideology to have. If I went back in time and I really got a chance to sit with Malcolm X, who was the same height as me, by the way, I don't think he would not agree. He would not fucking agree with that shit. I highly doubt that. I equate these stupid ass ideologies to the movie Judas and the Black Messiah, where, and I brought this up in another video, where he tries to meet up and unify with another black empowerment group. And then they were mad at him and hostile with him because their ideologies were different. But it's like, yo, can't we like come together and unite against a common enemy to further our goals and boost each other up? But instead you want to be mad at me because I don't think the same as you do on all aspects of life, when it doesn't fucking work like that. We could actually learn from each other and grow as a result of our differences instead of battling and killing each other because we're different. This is what I'm saying. And stupid shit like that gets in the way of that because it keeps us small. Because you see, we can only accomplish but so much with 50 people. But we can accomplish a lot with 50 million people. But how can we ever reach 50 million in numbers if we're saying, oh, well, the you know, everybody else, they don't belong because they're not the descendant of a freedman. Get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't have anything against people who are from Nigeria. I don't have anything against Africans. Shit, I got an Instagram crush, you know, on a girl that's from Senegal right now. She can barely speak English. You know what I'm saying? But we talk in the DM sometimes. Shout outs to her. You know, I don't look at her as like, oh, she's different than me because she's from over there. Just because, you know, there have been hostilities between Africans and blacks, you know, here. Yes, it's like I've seen Sugar Hill. What's this nice movie? Wesley Snipes, they want to get into business with the African drug dealers and shit like that. And I've seen this movie a million times. I'm about to give the quote. And then, you know, they're discussing business, and he says to Wesley, he goes, you know, don't take this personally, Romello, but it can't work, okay? You do your thing, I do my thing, okay? But it can't work. We can't work with Akata. And then Wesley goes, what's this Akata shit? And he says, African American, cotton picker. And then they get into a fight. And it's like, yo, that shit is so damn dumb. That shit is so damn dumb. Because nobody else is doing that. And they're in a better economic, you know, situation, social, racial situation than we are. And we're the only ones, crabs in a barrel. And we'll gladly do this shit. Gladly do that shit. Yes, jack your shit. It is something to be proud of. But at the same time, don't use that to try to come at me, nigga. I don't even fucking know you. I don't know you. It's like we're allies. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Alien versus Predator. Same shit. You had fucking the Predator that was trying to kill the aliens, and then you got the humans that was trying to escape the aliens. Sanaa Lathan's sexy ass was like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. She teamed up with the fucking predator. They got out of there. That's how it goes. But what would have happened if you had the humans trying to kill the predators and the predators trying to kill the humans and the aliens at the same time? The aliens would have won because the aliens understood when we have greater numbers and we're more united than they are. So we can outsmart them because the aliens were feral, but them niggas were smart. They were not dumb. They were smart. We have to operate and function the same fucking way. Instead of how should I say, waiting for a handout, we could be each other's handout. But first, we have to acknowledge that we are all the same and look at each other like that. Because once we do that and we see a black person be accosted, like, oh, hold on. Yo, that's us. I'm him. It's like just recently, New York Knicks fans bugging out in the middle of the motherfucking streets. And I see a black person who, this nigga, honestly, this nigga dead ass looked like dude's brother. Them niggas had the same hairstyle, everything like that, except the other black dude with dreads was a little bit lighter complexion than the black dude, fighting him because he's got a Spurs jersey. And I'm like, yo, but y'all niggas look alike. Same hairstyle, same everything, but you about to fight him over an organization that cares nothing for you? How dumb can you be? But all these people want to talk about God, right? All these people want to talk about, yeah, God. Shut the fuck up, man. Edify yourself. Educate yourself. Enlighten yourself. And then come back and have a conversation. But until then, until we come together, things are going to be always the way that they are because they're showing you that we got everybody else's back but you. So why can't we have our own? Why can't we have our own back? I don't understand the logic behind that. What's the problem? Because Tariq Nasheed is telling you that, oh, Africans don't fuck with you. They're tethers. Caribbeans don't fuck with you because they're tethers. What the fuck is that? What is that? When, if I'm not mistaken, I seen old dude in a daishiki before. Where are daishikis from? Africa. Dude had a whole book or DVD or some shit talking about how to be a player and the strategies of a pimp, strategies of a player. And I'm like, you were doing that before. So what would you know about African people and blacks when this is what you were doing and talking about before? How does that translate? He was an actor or some type of media pundit or something like, you know what I'm saying? You used to be an actor and a pimp author. And then now all of a sudden you're a fucking expert on black people. And then all you're doing is holding us back. And people are blindly following you. How does that work? When if Malcolm X was here, he'd be like, what? What? Huh? When Malcolm X said, the great Malcolm X said, he was like, these leaders, you know what I'm saying? These so-called leaders, Lena Horne and Dick Gregory. He was like, he said, name one community where their leaders are comedians and actors and athletes and pimp book authors. And people are following you because it speaks to an insecurity that they have, and it's addressing that and healing that in the wrong way. So you're giving them a false sense of identity by putting other black people down. At least if you're going to pull people down, pull other non-blacks down. If you don't see any melanin, then have at it. Then do that. I'm not saying to be hateful to other people, but I'm just saying, that's what we should be doing. Because I don't believe in that. I know some people don't like Pan-Africanism, but I'm like, hey, that's actually the most conducive way black people can better themselves, not even just in America, but just from a worldwide standpoint. You know what I'm saying? But again, until we put, in the words of Zeus from God of War, until we put our petty differences aside, we'll never be able to wipe out this plague, which is our own disenfranchisement from a worldwide standpoint. Around the fucking world. Because they convinced you that a Haitian person is not the same as a Jamaican person. That a Ghanaian person is not the same as a Nigerian person. That a real ancient Nubian is not the same as a Trinidadian person. That a Trinidadian person is not the same as someone who descends from slaves in Georgia. When, again, arguably, those slaves most likely came from West Central, East, or Sub-Saharan Africa. That's most likely where they came from. Transatlantic slave trade. Hello? Because until you can actually prove where your ancestors came from and who they were in America that predates the transatlantic slave trade, you're not aboriginal to this country. You are not. You are not the original indigo people unless you can prove it. Like I said, I can prove historically that my ancestors come from, again, West, Central, East Africa. I can prove that. I can prove that historically because that's where my people come from. But until you can prove that you are native to this land, you're only jacking being a slave, a former slave, a pet to a white person, an unwilling pet at that, being a house Negro. Cause shit, I remember Tupac was like an African American. Like, yo, we're not jacking that. I'm black or African. To me, the two are interchangeable because that's where we come from. Period, straight up. All right, 2. Now, what black people need to do is to change the conversation. Now, if you know anything about Malcolm X, you would know that what Malcolm X was trying to do very later on in his life, and this is after he left the Nation of Islam, was that he was trying to turn the civil rights struggle into a human rights struggle. And he was trying to take it to the United Nations and bring it, to the world stage versus keeping it contained to the United States of America. And the reason why is because he knew after a certain point that he was not going to achieve the results that he wanted because the United States were never going to address any of those issues that he was raising, right? So I was like, if you come to my house, I can do whatever I want, however I want to do it in my house. I mean, legally, you know what I'm saying? So you don't get to come into my space and then tell me how I'm supposed to treat you. You're in my space. You see what I'm saying? You see, this is why, racist white people would always tell black people back in the day, oh, well, go back to Africa. Well, the thing is, the quality of life is not going to be the same in Africa because y'all fucked it all the way up over there. So to tell me to go and do that, is asinine because, again, it's the playing field is not the same. So that's one, because I feel when black people, they ask for justice, that's such a broad term. And, the government can basically interpret that however they want to and then respond in the most minuscule way if they even respond at all. So you turn justice into say, I want legislation that'll respect my human rights. I want my human rights to be respected because the human rights of black people have been violated for years and years and years. So you centralize the conversation instead of allowing it to be so fucking broad as to where it's like, all right, you're asking me for justice, but what are you actually asking me for? What's the list of demands? You have something you're asking them for. So we want legislation that is going to prevent this from happening ever again. And at least if it does happen, then true justice will be served versus, Cyrus getting shot by Rick Chow. And then not only does this man get off scot-free, but this doesn't, the outcome by no way, shape, or form protects kids, black boys and girls, men and women, and elderly just like him in the future. The same thing could happen again if it hasn't happened already. So that's what you ask for. You ask for human rights legislation exclusively for black people, not people of color. Okay, don't multiculturalize that shit. We want it for all and any persons who can be considered to be black, African, melanated people. That's what you do. Just the same way how Asian people got theirs, this is what you ask for. And I don't even think Asian people had to ask for too long. You see what I'm saying? And if they were asking anyway, they knew exactly what to ask for. So black people need to know what they're asking for. Okay, it doesn't come in the form of a dollar amount. It actually comes in the form of true change. Because that's how things will change when you know, okay, this will never happen again. And I know that the human rights of other black people, just like me, will be respected in the future. So that's number 2. And number 3, the economic advancement of black businesses. Because just the same way, it's like, all right, because again, I'm using my own, community down the street as an example, right? And again, I mean, how possible is it is a different story. But because I know, like, all right, if I were to go and walk into one of these kosher stores, these motherfuckers would probably be looking at me like I'm crazy. I bet you I'd probably feel like I'm walking into 1962 if I were to go over there, because it's for them. It's specifically for them, right? But if we were to first come together and look at ourselves as one people, then the next phase, which is to come together economically, boom, that's where I was going with it. So we first come together socially, acknowledge that we are one people, just different variants of the 5 or 6 different haplogroups through which we descend from. 2, we come together economically, because now it would be a lot easier to create a Black Wall Street now than it was back when they tried to do the shit. Because with integration and the civil liberties that we do have, it's like there's no excuse why we're not doing something like that now. To me, and not to say there aren't people trying, but I think that's how we can first change things around. So you literally use Jewish people as a point of reference. I'm just saying, because to me, I'm like, yo, that's what we should be doing. Because they're creating whole communities for themselves, a lane for themselves, to the point where, again, like, you would think that this was a primarily Jewish community, more so than it is a community comprised of Blacks, Latinos, which is where I'm at. Because they're not doing that in the white communities because they can't, but they can easily make a lane for themselves here, which they've done that. Better housing, better facilities. I was even watching a video and it was saying how, not only do they, it's like, all right, how we have like the Food and Drug Administration. And then they're the ones that look over all the food, that you'll find at ShopRite and Stop and Shop and Costco and all that, right? But he was saying how Jewish people, they have their own separate organizations that look over their food and double check the food to make sure that the quality of the food is there and safe for their people to eat. Black people don't have that. We don't have a Dr. Sebi organization where we can look at our foods and find the symbol on there to make sure that it is Dr. Sebi approved. We don't have any of those stores, none of that. But this could be a byproduct of economic to economic congregation amongst Black people. That's 2. That's 2 off rip. And I mean, really 3. In my opinion, I think Black people should really, disconnect from Christian, Catholic, and non-Black ideologies and get into, African, spiritual practices. That's really what I think, because technically you're never going to reach the spiritual consciousness that you're supposed to while you're attached to religious dogmas that were created by people that are not of you, and they didn't have you in mind with all of those things that they were writing in these fucking books. Never. And this is why a lot of people are able to commit heinous acts of violence against one another. I'm talking about Black people because, again, your idea of God is a Caucasian. Period. And then needless to say about all the television shows and shit that people watch that, is nothing but Black on Black hostility. So it's like you're being conditioned where you're watching a show like Snowfall, even though it's a good show, but it's Black people at war with each other practically the entire time, killing each other and doing all types of shit. You follow me? So to me, it's just that's up to other people. You know what I'm saying? I'm not selling anybody on that, but that's just what I would do if I was in charge of my own country. Period. And last, man, I would just say, just fucking, just don't promote unhealthy cultures, like unhealthy, stupid ass subcultures that don't move the needle forward for us, bro. Like, so it's just like a total unification in ideologies, social, economic, and could be spiritual too. You know what I mean? And cultural also. Like, so it's like the music that we listen to can't be some bullshit that's again holding us back. Because anybody that knows what I know, we all know that music is frequency. Music is frequencies, and music is conditioning, really, because you're listening to sounds play in your ear along with vibrations, which makes your mind more receptive to what you're listening to. You know what I'm saying? And most people, again, they don't even listen to the lyrics. Like they just listen to the beat and how it makes them feel. Right? And also too, lastly, yeah. We need to also disconnect from the idea that the patriarchal systems of Western society. Because I have to address this. before I close out. Tens of thousands of years ago, we were a matriarchal people. We revered black women, okay? Black women were very important to black men. Shit, in ancient Egypt, black women were the lawmakers, black men were the enforcers of the law. We were the protectors of black women. Everybody knows now, it's common knowledge now, even though I knew this shit, 6-7 years ago, that the Sphinx was made in the image of a black woman. And that they knock off the noses on all of these fucking things to get rid of all of the black features. Go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and look at how many exhibits have the nose and the faces fucking either knocked off or totally destroyed. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? And why do you think that Egyptology only freaking covers 6,000 years of historical documentation, but black people can be traced back 250,000 years? So what we were doing before that. But yeah, we need to eliminate the discourse between black men and black women, because they're coming after black women like it's nothing. Like it's nothing. And I see it. I've been seeing that shit for years, but it's intensifying now. And black people also have to get on board with the fact that interracial dating is non-black. It's non-black. If you're a black woman, this goes triple for black women, because this is really how they try to become us. It's through y'all. If you're a black woman and you're in a relationship with a white man, you're anti-black. If you're a black woman and you're in a relationship with a white woman, a white lesbian woman, you're anti-black. And you're of Eurocentric cultures and ideologies. Absolutely. Because to date a white woman, to date a white man is the same thing of you might as well put on a t-shirt and say, I love white people. That is the same thing. Because no black person that is in a relationship with a white person, really non-black, but specifically a white person, they have to, you might as well be wearing a t-shirt that says, I love white people and I love whiteness, because you do. Because you go to sleep with it, you wake up with it, you make love to it. You talk to it every day. Every day. I don't want to hear about how much you love black people when you don't love it enough to share your life and resources with somebody that looks just like you. What you're doing is anti-fucking black. Period. Period. Love is not love. Love is a social, economic decision and statement that you are making to the rest of the world. I cannot say that I do not love whiteness. I cannot say I have a problem with white supremacy. I cannot say I cannot say I have a problem with white oppression against black people if I'm in a relationship with a white person. And anyone non-black. I'm not for black people if I'm not furthering my black lineage by being with a black woman. Especially black, this goes, because I know a lot of black men catch flack for dating white women, and not saying that they shouldn't, but black women, I be seeing y'all. I literally just watched Blink twice. Every black woman needs to watch Blink twice. Watch that movie. You are anti-black if you are in a relationship with a white man. This is facts. It's just what it is. You are holding us back. You are a servant to the system by dating a white man or a lesbian white woman. Anti-black. Come back. Come back home and stay with us. You do not care about your own people if you are not furthering your race. If you think your life is just about you and only about you and not about your descendants, then have at it. Have at it, because this doesn't apply to you. But don't ever talk about blackness. Don't ever talk about black people, because we ain't got nothing to do with you. At that point, Uncle Ruckus. That's what you become when you're in a relationship with someone who is not black, particularly white people. Period. Because there are certain things about me that a white woman will never understand. She will never empathize. She will never get it, because my whole life, my whole being, my whole existence is foreign to her. Foreign language. I'm like a hieroglyphic. She doesn't get it. She can't read it. She's not going to understand the idea, because it's not meant for her. It's not for her to understand. Not to say that there aren't a couple of, a few attractive white chicks out there. Yeah, sure. But it's not going to help me to be in a relationship with them. I'm sorry. It's just not. She's not for me. And I've always said that I don't want that type of attention by walking down the street with a white woman. I'm sorry. And the hassle of interracial dating, black people bring it upon themselves. So it's a struggle, but it's a struggle you asked for. You asked for that. To be in a relationship with a white man, a white woman, or a lesbian white woman is anti-black, and you're holding us back. You shouldn't even be talking about George Zimmerman, Karmelo Anthony, Rick Chow, Cyrus Belton, Carmack. You can't even have this conversation with them. You can't have this conversation about them, I mean. You can't. You can't. And this is why we will never have power. We'll never have justice. We'll never have stability until we come together. So y'all got to stop that shit on all sides of the spectrum. And I successfully bodied all that. So anybody tries to say, oh, America's not racist. White people aren't racist. The Constitution has black people in mind. Oh, everything is great. Oh, it's sunshine and rainbows. Send them this video if you made it this far. If you made it this far. But anyway, on that note, this was a very long video. What are your thoughts? Please be sure, as always, to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.